everybody, this is the Wild Ass Podcast, and I am your host, Wild Ass Craig. This is episode 22, and in this episode, I get to introduce all of you to the world-famous Rick Dorfmeyer. This is a guy that I met back in my days with Scott USA. At that time, Rick was a Tucker rep in Indiana. Our favorite city was Indianapolis. We'll talk about that one. Since way back then, I've never denied the fact that Rick has been my favorite rep to travel with. Rick has more motorcycle stories than anyone I know, and I have no doubt that we'll get a few of those out here now. Rick, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Craig. I apologize for my dog barking in the background. She loves the way you sound.
Something wasn't right, so she was ready to protect you.
That's exactly right.
You are now in Arizona, correct?
Yeah, southern Arizona, about 30 miles north of the Mexican border, and enjoying a rather warm and windy fall / coming into winter. It's a little better winter than it used to be in Indiana.
We were talking a little bit before we started recording, and you said it's a little cold there, 40 degrees. Here today in Minnesota, where it's currently snowing, we probably have half an inch on the ground so far.
And back in the Indiana days, if it was 40 degrees outside, we were out riding.
Right? I think we've reached that point now here where the roads it's freezing on the roads. I noticed this morning it was a little slick in spots, so I think the bikes are pretty much put away for the season.
I'll bet.
Let's see. We've had a little difficulty connecting. We've been trying to put this together for a few weeks, but here we are. I'm looking forward to this.
Me too.
Linda, how's Linda doing? Tell us who Linda is, actually.
Linda is my wife, and way better than I deserve. She's doing spectacularly well. The recent elections notwithstanding, Arizona's a little confused about how to run an election, as you can tell.
We need kindergartners to come in and count things, it sounds like.
That would be a great improvement.
It's funny that, some of this stuff, when I talk to my friends on here, it's like I have to remember this is a show where I'm introducing you to people, so they don't get to know all the stories that I have with you, and I'm looking forward to getting some of those out. You have a couple of boys, right?
I have 3 sons. I have a grandson, 2 granddaughters, and 2 great-granddaughters.
Tell us about all them.
Well, my sons are all still living in the Indianapolis metropolitan area. They are all spectacular as usual. My oldest son adopted my youngest grandson. He's now 6, which is a little bit crazy because my oldest son is going to be 51 next month, and I don't know if I'd be up for starting that project, but I can tell you when Frankie came out to visit me, I lost weight every day. That guy is really busy, and he is a serious motorcyclist, which is awesome.
That's awesome. Does the whole family ride?
No, my oldest granddaughter rides. My oldest son rides. My other 2 sons have taken up other hobbies, which was their prerogative. I never pushed motorcycling on anybody. Except for maybe my oldest son really didn't have a choice. He just kind of grew up in the middle of my more serious flat tracking and all of that stuff days.
Lucky boy.
Yeah, well, lucky for me.
Do you remember way early on, do you remember what got you into motorcycles?
I'd like to blame it on my grandfather, who was, I have a picture hanging on the wall. It was actually in one of the Tucker Rocky catalogs of my grandfather riding a Super X before he left for World War I. So I'd like to blame it on him. I'm not sure that's the truth, but it's a good story anyway.
Right. Do you remember your first bike?
Well, it was sort of a hand-me-down. My stepbrother joined the Marine Corps and left me with a Cushman Highlander. I was 12, and we lived in downtown Indianapolis, and so riding it around the neighborhood was a little risky and caused me some grief from time to time, but nothing too terrible.
When I think of the Cushman, I think of the pass-through scooter where the engine's underneath you. Is that the one?
Yeah, it was horrible. It had no battery. It had a sort of an energy transfer electrical system, so the headlight and taillight went dim when you slowed down, which was horrible. And there was only a rear brake, and it was a pedal on the floor like a car. It had a ratchet starter and had a top speed of about 45, and it was truly treacherous at 45 miles an hour.
I was going to say, on one of those, that is flying.
Yeah. Well, it got me my first stitches. On the way to driver's ed, by the way.
Oh, no way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Some people would say I still haven't learned. I don't know.
Do you remember your progression of bikes after that? I mean, you've probably had quite a few.
Well, after the scooter, I found myself on Yamaha 80 street bike, and I found myself borrowing motorcycles from time to time. The fastest thing in the world at that time was a 305 Scrambler that just totally scared me to bejesus. And then in '67, I decided I wanted to buy the fastest production motorcycle you could buy at the time. And then that was kind of between a Sportster XLCH Harley 900 and a 650 BSA Hornet. And the deciding factor was the Sportster was $1,725 and the BSA was $1,354. So I bought the BSA. And it truly was a lot faster than the Sportsters of the day. And in fact, in 1967, the summer of '67, when I bought that motorcycle, it was financed through Nichols loan at $80 a month for 2 years, and I paid for it taking money from Sportsters on the street in the summer of '67.
That's awesome. This was all in the Indianapolis area.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we used to hang out at this place called the Parky down on the west side of Indianapolis, and the stories go on forever, and some of them ought not to ever be retold.
At least not in a setting like this.
Probably not, yeah.
Of all the bikes you've had, do you have a favorite?
Boy, that's tough. There are many motorcycles that I've owned that I wish I had never sold. I had a friend of mine sold me his original '78 Yamaha DT1 with a Git kit, and I got myself in a little bit of a squeeze financially, and I sold it, and I wish I had figured out how to get out of that squeeze without selling that bike. I had a 650 Yamaha Street Tracker that I wish I hadn't sold. You know, it goes on and on and on. I sold a friend of mine who was my customer at that time a whole lot of classic Japanese motorcycles, and one of which is a red 400 four-cylinder Honda. I wish I had that bike back again. There are stuff like that you know, I would like to think that I would want my Hornet back again, my '67 Hornet, but I've got a '69 Bonneville, and I can tell you those motorcycles are fun to ride around a little bit, but they're better to look at than they are to actually ride by comparison with today's fuel injection, electric start, and all that stuff. By comparison, those things were horrible, and I can't believe we got away with riding them as hard as we did.
That's crazy.
That Hornet ended up being my first race bike, too, by the way.
Oh, it did? Do you know where any of these old bikes are? Like, are they gone now, or do you still know where they're at, I guess?
I know where a lot of them are, but smarter heads than me, they're not for sale. So, it's like, I don't know, I'd have to win the lottery to go buy them back again because I'd have to pay enough money to get somebody's attention, and I'm just not that guy. So
I get that. This Hornet, tell us about this, and you started racing with it. What's the story there?
Well, I was building a Formula V race car. I was going to be a race car driver. Oh man, was I going to be a race car driver? And then I'm a couple of $1,000s into this deal, and it's a roller, but I'm not near done. And my neighbor, Cecil Francis Squires III, we called him Stormy, comes riding up in my driveway with a '66 Hornet with a number plate on it. And I said, "Where'd you get that?" He said, "Dryers." And I said, "What are you doing with that?" He said, "I'm Scrambles TT racing." And I said, "Really? How much was it?" And he told me how much it was. So I immediately went out and sold my Formula V and cruised on down to Dryers and financed that '67 Hornet, rode it for the summer and the winter of '67 and '68. And then in the spring of '68 became a amateur TT / flat track racer of no renown whatsoever. But I had a lot of fun.
And that was just the beginning, because you've pretty much been racing ever since, haven't you?
Racing something ever since. There was a long period of time with a friend of mine named Ronnie Anderson where we went, I got a license and went flat track racing. I went to the flat track races and I rode around the racetracks. I can't say that I was really much of a racer, but in those days, if you were a novice going to Ohio to race, you were one of at least 100 at every race, and you had to win one of the 10 fastest heat races to even go into Maine. You could put 4 laps in a heat race and put it on the trailer and still go home. And those days were crazy, but I met some wonderful people, Ronnie Roll, Gary Nixon, Dick Mann, on and on and on. Met a bunch of really cool people that were always my heroes as far as dirt track racing. Well, Dick Mann and Gary Nixon could really, really ride road racers as well. And so, you get to the point where you wonder about how today's racers would do if they had to compete under the same circumstances as those older racers did, doing short track, TT, half mile and mile, and then road race as well. Those guys really, really could ride a motorcycle no matter what.
I always wonder that same thing. If you brought back some of those old racers, me growing up in motocross, if you brought back some of those old heroes, put them on modern technology, like the old Rocky movie where they did, they had the video game. Did you ever see that one?
No.
I'm a huge Rocky fan. But, they put Rocky against the current day fighter. It was one of those, it was a movie. It was a Rocky movie. So I'd love to see that in the motorcycle world. Obviously, it could never happen because our bodies couldn't hold up to it anymore. Valid point. I'd love to see what would happen with those bikes today, or even take today's riders and put them on those bikes, see if they could even ride.
Well, you see what happened to road racing for America in the Kenny Roberts days when those guys were flat trackers to Freddie Spencer. Those guys were flat trackers first. They learned how to pitch a motorcycle sideways before they ever learned how to drag a knee. And of course, Kenny Roberts really inspired all of that stuff. But that's other folks' histories, and it's just wonderful to have lived through that time to see all that excitement.
It is. And to hear the tire manufacturers complain about that one specifically.
Right.
So you did the flat tracking thing. What other racing did that lead to? Give us your racing history.
I moved in across the street from a road racer over by the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. His name is Brad Marvel. He's still one of my very best friends. And Brad was graduating from a TZ250 to an OW31 and handed me his bucket full of parts that ended up being a TZ250 for me in '78. That really started my pavement scratching days. And again, we go clear through the middle '90s with the Bloomington Power Sports, the race team. We did an endurance road race series. In those days, I had Greg Blackwell on the team. I mean, we had really a great team. Our bikes looked wonderful. Our motto was to have a great time and show up for work on Monday morning. And we really had some good seasons. In '95, we had a super bike and we had a super sport, and the super bike that I was riding, we ended up third in the nation in the endurance series. And I think it was mostly because we showed up at every race and mostly finished every race. So I really have had a very fortunate time. In the later days, I bought a TZ250 from a guy named Jim Nip, who had done a beautiful job of putting that bike together, and I rode it until 2005. Won the North Central region for WERA on that bike, and then managed to crash big time at the World Finals, busted my shoulder ball off and broke my left collarbone. And that was sort of the end of the road racing program. But it also kind of inspired what's happening now, which is land speed racing at Bonneville and wherever else I can find a place to ride that thing. We set some records in 2010 with our Project 212 bike, which Tim Halsmer and a great group of guys. Again, Race Guthrie, Bloomington Power Sports, a big sponsor in that program, and managed to set a record in 2010 of 194 miles an hour with a CBR 600 with a turbocharger. So felt pretty good about that. Had an exit speed of 198 miles an hour, which is kind of an interesting speed. It's like, okay, that's fast, but it's 2 miles an hour short of what we're really aiming for. But what are you going to do? You just got to keep going at it. Now I ride a chassis built by Billy Wooldridge, who built all of Dave Schultz's drag race chassis, and it's got a Hayabusa motor in it, and it is the most confounding, frustrating motorcycle I've ever owned, but we're going to win on that thing. It's eventually going to be a record holder, but it sure has taken a lot of time and energy to get there.
I bet. I remember seeing Project 212. I remember being in that garage with you looking at that bike. I think, was that in the very beginnings of it? Do you remember?
That thing was probably so. That would have been, we started building it in 08 and took it to Bonneville the first time in 09 and then set records with it in 2010.
Okay, yeah, so it was in the very beginnings because that was when I was with Scott and came down and traveled with you. So the road race crash, that took out both of your arms, correct? Like it was the one shoulder and the other collarbone?
Yeah, so you're riding in the ambulance headed for the hospital, and you're laying there realizing what happened to you. And I got a brand new, a year. My girlfriend's been with me for a year. She traveled with me the whole road race circuit that year. But she's still my girlfriend, not my wife. And I'm riding in that ambulance to the hospital, and I'm going, oh man, I hope I can still wipe my own ass. And as it turned out, I could. But in the meantime, now this is the kind of woman she is. Miss Linda is amazing. She realized what the situation was, and she went to the drugstore and bought some rubber gloves and got herself together just in case it was going to be her job.
Wow.
And then she got to drive a diesel truck with a trailer on the back, never having done any of that before, all the way back to Indiana from Road Atlanta. And she won a lot of brownie points for putting up with my sorry self.
No kidding. Yeah, she's amazing. I've gotten to know her throughout the years. Well, I remember the reason I asked about that crash is I remember I had worked for Scott at the time, and I called Primo and Bob, the two people I had to answer to. Said, hey, I want to go down and travel with Rick. I don't want to make this a Scott trip. I just want to carry his stuff in and out of shops. Do you remember that?
Yeah. That was incredible.
Well, and then they sent me this watch that I think they sent it right before that. And they said, okay, here's your incentive, but you have to sell, I think it was 200 pair of goggles to get it. And I don't even know if I brought goggles with to get this watch. I don't remember that part of it, but we were talking about it on the way to one of the shops. And I think you said, well, let's get you a watch. That's so funny. They'll never forget that story.
Well, in those days, Scott goggles were the goggles. They outsold all other goggle companies put together, and in my territory, they were king. I love that company. I love those people, yourself included. And some of those folks are still my friends, and including you. And I appreciate that time and the enthusiasm that the customers had for that product, and not just the dealer, but also the retail customers. I mean, you went to a motocross track, it was all Scott goggles all the time. And those days were just really the glory days, for sure.
Yeah, we owned it. And I'm still friends with everybody there pretty much. In fact, I talked with Bob Lowry. He's all retired now. I talked with him just Friday, I think it was. So I try to talk to him every couple months. I talk to Primo every month. Still see Watt once in a while.
Yeah, I talk to Scott from time to time myself.
You probably see him at events, huh?
Once in a while, but mostly we just stayed friends, and so it's birthdays and this and that. We're just it's just like that, That's the motorcycle industry that people from outside and all of these equity owners just don't understand. I mean, this has been maybe the biggest, most enthusiastic organization I've ever been part of. I've never run across somebody that I just decided I didn't like and would never like ever. And for the most part, it's like, you got to be kidding me. This is just the greatest bunch of people. If it was a political party, it would be the most diverse political party of all times. Every color, every race, every creed, every gender, whatever. If you ride a motorcycle, you're in the team, you're on the team, and it's a good deal, man. It's an awesome time.
For sure. You used to put together the backcountry rides, and I always think of those too. And your one rule that you always said at your events, do you remember that rule? I'm sure you do, so I just want you to share it with everybody listening.
Sure, I stole this line from a friend named Mike Lehman, owns a repair shop in Scottsburg, Indiana. Mike, I went to an event that he held, and I heard him say, "This is not a race. You cannot win, but you can most assuredly lose." And that just stuck with me. I mean, people get it right away. You can lose big time, but when you're having an event, it's supposed to be for the good time. And for the most part, I have to say that's always been the case.
Always. I don't know I think you're aware of my own memorial ride that I do every September. Every September, the Saturday after Labor Day, is the Craig Johnson Memorial Ride. And this year was the 10th. And we had quite a few people here, and I've never done a writers meeting beforehand. And I just felt like I needed to, and I used that line. I modified it a little bit. I said, the same thing. You cannot win today. I'm here at my own memorial, so I've already won. But if something happens, you can definitely lose. Something along those lines. It was pretty funny. So I've never forgotten that. And then there was actually two then, and it was the one I first thought of because I didn't think that was really a rule, but we have no rules.
Yeah, no. Here, in those days, it was always sponsored for the most part, by Tucker Rocky, and so at Tucker, we don't like to make rules. We don't want to make rules. Don't make us make a rule, because if you do, we're going to name it after you, so everybody can be pissed at you instead of us.
Right. That's a great rule. I remember one of those rides. I think it was probably the first one I came down for. One of those backcountry rides. And I was flying down. I was with Airhawk at the time, and we were pushing the seat, and you had a bike for me. It was that XR 1200, and the only XR I knew of was a Honda, and I didn't know they made a 1200. So I had to Google it and find a picture of it, and I rode that bike. I think you told me you ride that thing like it's your own, and I said, I don't think you want me to do that.
Well, there's always a certain tension when you're riding somebody else's stuff. And you just, it's just going to be what it's going to be, and you can't make it worse you shouldn't make it worse by saying things like, don't fall off of my junk, you have to pay for it, yada, yada, all of that stuff. I want people to have a good time when they go for a ride, and if something happens, it just happens. Yeah. I don't intentionally fall off of motorcycles either, but sometimes it happens.
No, that was such a cool bike, and I didn't know anything about it, and man, did I have fun riding it.
Good.
What's your current cruiser? Because I know you're still getting out on the street, other than your land speed bike, of course. Other than your land speed bike, of course. We're talking about.
Well, Linda and I both have Harleys. I call it a geezer glide. It's an 06 Ultra. Linda rides a Sportster, a 1200 Sporty, and she rides it very well. And we rode yesterday, as a matter of fact. We rode about 100 miles. Arivaca is at the other end of a really nice crooked road that has a lot of elevation changes and whatever. We enjoy making that ride. And I've got a DL 650. That's my adventure bike. I know it's pretty mundane by KTM standards or Triumph standards or BMW standards, but I tell everybody this motorcycle is never going to get me laid, but it always gets me home.
That's the perfect saying for that bike. Great bikes,
yeah,
though.
Right. I've had a lot of miles on that bike, and I've beat it severely, and it doesn't seem to mind.
No, they're awesome. I think, and it's funny when you talk to somebody else that has one, they'll say, "Oh man, that's such a great bike. I've had one for this many miles, never had a problem with it." It seems like everywhere you go, somebody that has owned a Suzuki V-Strom.
I think it's the same for KLRs. I mean, you talk about motorcycle in a brown paper bag. That's for sure. But I know a friend of mine back in Indiana had 27,000 miles on one of those things, and 72,000 miles on one of those things, and he had a website called howaboutyou.com for that bike, and it was amazing how many people had him, how many contributions he had to that website. It was pretty amazing motorcycle, and it's as boring a motorcycle as you can get, but it starts and runs, and that's the same for my 650. It's not perfect at anything, except for that it always starts and it always runs, and it always gets me home.
Yeah, they're not. It's like you say, they're not perfect at anything, but they're not terrible at anything.
No,
they kind of just do everything well.
It's so easy to ride. I can scare a sport bike guy to pieces out on Arivaca Road, as crooked as that road is. As long as there's no real long straightaways, I can scare them pretty good with that motorcycle.
Where did the name World Famous come from?
Well, it's a pure accident. However, I've been listening to some tapes that Chuck Ramage sent me, And Chuck Ramage was my first regional sales manager at Tucker Rocky when the merger happened after I had started with Rocky Cycle. One of the people speaking on the tape said, you got to figure out how to separate yourself from everybody else. You've got to somehow appear to be different than everybody else. Well, I'm sitting at home and the phone rings and I picked it up and I said, world famous. And on the other end was the then owner of Tucker Rocky, which was Bob Nickel. And Bob was a pretty serious man. And when he laughed, I knew I had something. So I sat down over a couple of beers and tried to decide how many people I knew in foreign countries and decided close enough. So I was world famous.
That's awesome.
And there are people who to this day still call me that. And I appreciate you remembering. It is, it's been fun because it's been over 30 years that I've been world famous.
Well, I remember hearing it from Primo and I'm like, world famous. I said, why? Why is he world famous? He just said, because he's the world famous Rick Dorfmeyer. I really never had any explanation. That was it.
No, there's hardly any to have. Right.
That's hilarious. How often do you get back to Indianapolis?
A couple, 3 times a year. My sons are still back there, and a lot of friends, and I still have a barn full of junk back there that I got to go back and try to rescue or figure out or sort through and decide what to bring out here to Arizona. I really just have a lot of wonderful friends and great memories back there. There's an organization called Stony Lonesome that is one of the oldest dirt bike company or organizations in the at least in Indiana, and got some great friends there. They've hosted the Buffalo 500 since I started it in 1988, and they continue to host it still today.
What is the Buffalo 500?
Well, it started out as a gravel road enduro. The Hoosier National Forest has been temporarily closed to off-road motorcycles since 1973. Still is today. So I got the idea from another guy in Bloomington that we should just start a gravel road enduro. They can't stop us from running through the Hoosier National Forest on street legal motorcycles on the gravel roads. So that's basically how it got started. I ended up with some great long life friends forever that helped me get that thing going. Roy Garrett is still one of the main drivers of that deal. Race Guthrie, again, Bloomington Power Sports. He was a big part of that program. And as it changed through the years, the American Motorcyclist Association came up with a thing called dual sport. And if I changed it from a gravel road enduro, which intimated that it was a competition, to a dual sport, then the insurance went from like $700 to like $175. And so it just seemed like a great idea. So it became a dual sport ride. And since then, over many decades now, it's become an adventure ride, a dual ride, and there's a street ride occasionally. And it has contributed a tremendous amount of money to the Brown County Boys and Girls Clubs over the years. And so because of that, charity has opened up a lot of private ground in Brown County for us to ride on. And I don't know, it's probably a lot like Minnesota is in the summertime. It's just loamy, beautiful trees and hills and creeks and whatever. And, it's just beautiful to get a ride on some of that property. It's been wonderful over these years, and that they still remember me and that that it still carries on is just a fantastic thing.
What time of year do they do that?
It's usually in September. You're always juggling the schedule to try to not interfere with somebody else. It's part of the national series. It has been ever since Suzuki created a national series a long time ago. And this last event generated about 300 riders for the weekend. We call it the Buffalo 500 because it's named after a friend of mine who just passed away last year at 97, named John Buffalo. And John used to have a thing called the Buffalo 100 during the period of time when the Hoosier National Forest was open to ride off-road, and it was a phenomenal event. And so John was a big part of helping me find the routes to ride and learn the stories and figure out what a wonderful idea it was. At 97, he was he was still a pistol.
Is it a 500-mile ride then? Is that why it's the 500 or?
So I started out calling it the 500 and then cheating by generating 500 kilometers in 2 days.
Okay.
So it's about 300 miles.
That's cool.
And when you think about how much time that is on 2-track and gravel road and whatever else, that's plenty in 2 days.
And
we have a great dinner on Saturday nights. I'm telling you, if any of your listeners want to experience what the true Midwest go for a motorcycle ride is like, the Buffalo 500 when it comes out in September of 23, make that trip. It's a blast. Many people have from all over the country.
Well, that's why I was asking when it is. Is it mid or late September by any chance, or is it early?
It's usually late September.
Okay. I will have to look for that. You have to remind me of that. So that sounds like a good time. Yeah, I'd love to come down and put some off-road miles on next fall.
It'd be a blast to have you.
You mentioned Race. You've mentioned him a couple times, Race Guthrie. I get to see him randomly. He comes walking up at events, stops in, says hi, but I thought he was out of the dealership. Is that not the case?
No, he is now. He is currently the caretaker, organizer, promoter, or whatever of the abate organization in the state of Indiana. Is one of the strongest abate organizations in the country, and they have a 300-acre piece of property south of Bloomington, Indiana, that he maintains. That is where the MSF off-road courses are held. There's always a hare scrambles there. Obviously if you're in Indianapolis, it's only an hour down there to go for a dirt bike ride. If you're looking for a place to ride and you don't have one of your own, because Indiana's really short on off-road. Although Race and Roy Garrett and a whole bunch of other people have helped the state organize about 5,000 acres to ride in now in Indiana. There's 1,500 acres over by not far from Terre Haute, Sullivan, Indiana, and then another 3,500 acres down by it's maybe a half an hour east of Evansville, Indiana. Those are big long-term projects. Mr. Lacey had a little help in helping us get that. Mr. Lacey was the chairman of the board of the company that owned Tucker for a long period of time, and he was friends with the governor, so he was able to help us open the area south of down by Evansville without all of the long-term strife that we had to go through to open the Redbird area over in the western part of the state. That took 7 years. And we looked like we were on that same track to open the area down south. But just as soon as the governor, who is now president of Purdue University, figured out that it would add some economic benefit to the area down there that was otherwise very poor, he just managed to help get it open right away. So it was, they do have 5,000 acres of public off-road land, and it's multi-use, so bicycles and horses and whatever else, but it's quite a relief from not having any.
Yeah, for sure.
It feels funny compared to out here in Arizona, where it's like, it seems like there's thousands of miles of trails, thousands and thousands of miles of places to ride, old mine roads. And it's just amazing all the riding there is around here. We managed a book from the Mine Museum in Bisbee that's got all of the old ghost towns, all the old mine towns, all of that stuff that have gone out of business located on it. So I don't care if I ever even find them. I just go looking for them. I don't even care. I just go them for a ride anyway.
Well, I'd love to take the time to come down and haul my bike down in the winter and spend a weekend with you out looking. You still do your ride on Super Bowl Sunday?
That didn't get done this year. It was a Tucker event, and so I'm really kind of rethinking about how to pull that off as a non-Tucker event.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was pre-Tucker departure or post.
No, it's that was, and Tucker did a nice job with that thing. They sent their videographer down, and he rode with us, and we got some great videos out of that thing, and of course it was a dealer ride, and so it always feels good to be able to take your customers out and show them a good time in a thank you kind of a way for all that they do for you and them as a salesman.
Yeah, for sure. Give us your career history, because you've been in the motorcycle industry for a long time. How did you get there? What got you into the motorcycle industry?
Well, my first motorcycle job was in '69 at Dave's Yamaha in Indianapolis at 46th and Evanston on the northeast side of town. He was a Yamaha OSA dealer, and I met some lifelong friends there too, Don McClung and Cody. It was amazing times. The parking lot was so small that we had little Yamaha mini enduros, the little 60s that we short tracked in the parking lot after hours, and great events happened there. It was an OSA dealer, and very small, and nonetheless, Mick Andrews showed up and showed us how a trials bike was ridden in the parking lot over a car. We'd never seen anything like that before, and those days were pretty cool. From there, most of the time I was a carpenter for a while, and then I took a job at Honda of Indianapolis in May of '77, and I was just going to be a salesman. I just wanted to be in the motorcycle business somehow, and I just wanted to be a salesman. And my boss, Bill Romer, he was big into the stock market, so he didn't like to come to work until 2:00 in the afternoon. But he said, well, the guy that you're replacing is going to stay here for 2 weeks, and he's going to show you the ropes, and then you'll be good. Well, the guy never came back the next day.
Oh, no.
So then that afternoon when Bill Romer came into work, he handed me the keys, and he said, okay, you get to open up. So from not having a job to running the place in one day was a little bit of a fast track for me, but I worked there off and on until I went to work for Rocky Cycle in 1983, in August of 1983, and worked there for 3 years, and it became Joe Piazza Sr., and Bob Nickel decided to merge the two companies, Rocky Cycle and Ed Tucker Distributing, and then that was it for the next 34 years. Along about 3 years later, Lacey Diversified Industries bought us, and so then I'm the sales rep in the home office of the parent company, and that was really one of the most amazing times in my life. Most successful, prolific, big time. It was awesome.
I remember that. And what are you doing now?
Well, not too long ago, the current leadership at Tucker decided my position as director of sales training was no longer necessary. That evidently regional sales managers and salesmen had been well trained, and I didn't need to be there anymore. So they let me go, and I sort of dealt with that for a few months, and then staying home just hasn't worked out real well for me over time. So I took a job I took a contract really with Race Winning Brands and worked for selling helping people understand Wiseco and Recluse and other brands that group owns. Worked that for a year. In the meantime, my former VP of sales, Jason Potter, went to work for a company called Nivell, who started a UTV division by buying Steve Shankin out at Seismic. And so Jason hired me to try to develop the business in the western third of the United States, and that's what I'm doing now. So I'm your basic bag carrying salesman with the title of regional sales manager, but I got 11 states to try to deal with, and so far we've made some progress. So that started in January, so I'm about to end my first year at this, and I feel pretty good about how things are going.
I'll say those 11 western states provide you plenty of windshield time.
Yeah, I'm getting on an airplane at 6:00 in the morning and flying to Salt Lake City, and I've been all over California and New Mexico, and of course Utah, Colorado, Nevada, whatever. So as I get older, I start to learn to appreciate airplane pilots and flight stewards more and more.
Right. How far north does your territory go? All the way to Canada?
Alaska.
Oh, all the way up there.
Yeah.
Are you responsible for Canada and the West also, or no?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Have you made it to Alaska yet?
No. Every time I think about going up there, something interrupts the process. But we have some great customers in Alaska, and I would sure love to visit them.
That's on the bucket list. I need to make an Alaska trip eventually. Of course, I'd love to do it on a motorcycle from here.
And I'd love to join you.
Yes, that would be great. Do you have any bucket list rides? This is normally one of my 5 questions, but it just popped into my head. So you've been around, you've seen a lot of things, you've done a fair amount of riding. Do you have any bucket list rides that you'd like to do?
So I didn't know I had some of the stuff I've already done on my bucket list until I was exposed to it. We went to Germany with Continental Tires to visit their test track and to ride on the Autobahn. We got to the test track. They had 3 garages full of all kinds of motorcycles. It was a Tucker-Rocky event. Steve Johnson was the president at the time, and he was there. And they were smart enough to let us bring our wives, which is highly unusual for vendors these days.
That's for sure.
And their test track was a 3-mile oval with 86-degree bank turns at the end of these long straightaways. And so you would just get whatever it is you were riding, as strung out as it would go. You would let the string out as far as it would run, and then you just head in there and wonder what was going to happen. And of course, it would just try to collapse the suspension because you're running, 150 or something, and just rock it through those corners. It was just amazing. And then they had some good road courses too, but the thrill of coming down the straightaway on a Rocket 3 or a Gixxer 1000 and then just heading into that high bank. I mean, I hadn't experienced anything like that except for, much smaller road course banking in the United States. By comparison, this thing was almost straight up and down. It was really a blast. And I'll never be able to thank Greg Reich and all those guys from Continental enough for that opportunity. Rides that I haven't done yet, gosh, some of them I just don't know where they are yet. I just can't wait to find out. I've ridden the Dragon. I've been to Happy Valley. I don't know what's left in the United States, but I'm ready to find out. It's just a blast to live here. This country is absolutely the most fabulous place, the most diverse place. And it has, as far as motorcycle people, it has the very best motorcycle people in it. Every time I've ever had a struggle of any kind, there's always been somebody to help. And of course, you try to pay that forward wherever you go.
Absolutely. I know I rode through Arizona this summer, kind of started, came in out of New Mexico, went down by Tucson, west of Phoenix, and then up through Flagstaff, Sedona, that area. I'd have to assume you've done that whole run from Jerome all the way up through there.
Yeah, so Jerome and Sedona. So we took a group of Harley riders on a ride from Phoenix up 191, which is, I invite you to ride that ride sometime. That's maybe, it challenges any road you've ever been on for how crooked it is. There's 98 miles for sure. You will never get in high gear. And then we spent the night in a really rustic place called, I'll think of it in a minute, and at about 9,000 feet. And then we rode from there to Sedona and spent the night, and then rode up to the riding is just unbelievable in Arizona. You just never run out of places to go up Oak Creek Canyon and all of that. And Sedona is one of the most fantastically beautiful places. We had dinner in a restaurant that was 5 stars if it was any, and the view out the windows were all those beautiful red striped cliffs in the distance. It was just amazing.
It's a beautiful part of the country. While you're talking there, I used the Rever app, and it looks like Highway 89 is the one that we were on.
So there's 2 89s. There's 89 and 89A.
This does not have an A.
So if you ride from Cottonwood to Jerome on 89A, you will experience one of the better paved mountain roads in the country.
When we're not being recorded, I'll have to look for where that is, because it looks like it went through Glenilla, Peoples Valley, Kirkland Junction, Glen Oaks. Is that what you said? Did you say that?
Oak Creek Canyon is 89, where it comes down from Flagstaff to Sedona.
Okay. Oh, this is still south of Prescott. Yeah, 89A then. Yep, through Jerome. Did all of that.
And then 89 from Cedar City, Utah, back down to Flagstaff. I mean, it's hard to find better roads than there are. I mean, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio. Michigan's the most amazing off-road riding there is. I guess Colorado and California can compete. But Michigan is that kind of loamy, beautiful pine forest kind of, and we've had MSR rides up there, and we had obviously Tucker rides up there as well. There's just, it's just a beautiful country to ride motorcycles in.
That's for sure. I always laugh when people say they have to go to other countries and they want to go other places. I'm like, have you been over here? Have you been up here? And they barely leave their own state, and they don't realize how much is in it, no matter which state we're in. And everyone's so different, too.
I think if you ride in your own place long enough, you fall in love with certain parts of it, and there's just no beating it no matter where you go. But then you go someplace else and you get a smile on your face anyway.
Right. It looks like I've covered all of the questions I had, other than a favorite story that you might have from your days in the industry. Anything pop into mind?
Well, one that I can tell in mixed company, I suppose.
Probably one that we can share, yeah.
So I have to tell you that the days of Lacey Diversified Industries owned in Tucker Rocky, we had some really great events. Not the least of which were the number of Malcolm Smith rides we had in Colorado, and the rides were death-defying for someone with the skill set that I've got. The memories will last long after I'm gone for an awful lot of people. But one for sure, we were riding this, we're 3 days into this ride, and we had ridden down Ajax Mountain with no motors on, and we'd done all kinds of crazy stuff. Malcolm was inspirational in all of this stuff. And I was riding DL 350. Is that right? DR 350. And it was kind of a pig. And of course, with that matched up with my skill set, wasn't helping matters any. And I rode up the top of this single track, and I'm looking at the top, and there's two big pine trees up there, and it looks like the trail's going to level off, and I'm going to go, man, I'm going to get a break. I know I'm going to get a break. And I ride up there, and it turns out there's three big giant boulders, one after another, and it's going to be a trials thing. You know, you're going to get up on one boulder and then jump to the next boulder and jump to the next one. And I'm going, well, I've survived everything else, so I'll just give it a try. So I get up on the first boulder and I lose my balance and I high side off the side. And of course, the exposure in Colorado is always death defying. And so I'm doing the 5-point, stuck myself to the side of the rock upside down, the motorcycle's handlebar down, and leaking gas, and the guys behind me are going, hang on. And I thought they were going to get like tie downs or whatever. They're going to help me get up. But instead they went to get their cameras. But there was some good fortune in that story, because before it was over with, I was not laying down there by myself.
Did they get pictures of everybody?
I hope so. I never got to see them.
Good stuff.
So that's just one of many. You go for a ride with Malcolm Smith, you're into a lot of stories.
I can only imagine. You've listened to this show before. I always do my 5 questions, which are completely random. Picked them beforehand, but laid them on the paper so I could ask them of you.
Okay.
Familiar with that part?
Ready when you are.
All right. Your first question: if you were to give a TED Talk, something outside of your main area of expertise, what would it be?
It's probably not wise to be as political as I am, but I would spend an awful lot of time helping people remember what the Constitution and the Bill of Rights say.
Oh, I like that. That's good. Okay. Question number 2. What purchase of $100 or less has most positively impacted your life in the last 6 months?
The purchase of the Little Red Book from Jeffrey Gitomer.
Explain the Little Red Book. I have it.
You want me to explain?
I have it. Yeah.
So many books give you kind of general 5,000-foot views of what it's like to be a salesperson. The Little Red Book tells you how to do it. I
got it as a gift, actually, from Joe. Very cool. I like that. I like the answers to that question, because usually when people think of what they bought, nobody thinks of what little things they buy. I like that one. So question number 3, what is something you believe that other people think is insane? So not what not what you think other people think is insane, something you believe that others would say is insane.
The freest moment in time is when you're going as fast as you can skillfully.
That's good. Question number 4. What is the worst advice you see or hear being dispensed in the motorcycling community?
That's a really interesting question. There are lots of things I don't like about what's going on in the industry right now. The idea that an equity organization with stockholders is a good thing is a bad thing as far as I'm concerned. The unbelievable focus on electric motorcycles is not a positive as far as I'm concerned. I'm trying to decide if there's some advice in there somewhere that I don't appreciate. I'm old, right? I'm 74, so I guess I qualify.
That's all right.
The truth is, the migration from cycle news that I could hold in my hands to cycle news on my phone is not good. Dealer news is the same. I want to be able to fumble through the pages. I want the tactile feel. I don't appreciate the digital version.
Sure.
So if people are advising the motorcycle industry because the younger crowd is digitally oriented, that the tactile part of motorcycling is not important, then I would say that's bad advice.
That's fair enough. I can't say I disagree. The final question number 5. This one is curious to hear your answer on this one. Do you have a quote you live your life by or that you think of often?
So I'll expose myself as a patriot.
That's okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I love it. Love it. That's usually about the wrap of the show, but one thing I want to ask you is I absolutely love being in the motorcycle industry. I've met so many great people, you being one of them, and that's no lie. When I talk to people and they say who's the best person you've ever traveled with, it's always Rick Dorfmeyer. Every time. Don't care who I'm traveling with. Don't care who I'm talking to. We get to meet people like you in this industry, people that have been around a while, but it's real hard to get in. If there's a kid listening or somebody knows of somebody looking to get in the motorcycle industry, how would you advise they do that?
So being in this industry, the motorcycle is the catalyst. The people are the reason. And so it's not about money, because if it was about, you got to have enough money to sustain yourself. There's no question about that. And you have to work hard at it. You want all of the goals you want to set all of the standards you can and achieve all the goals you can. I appreciate all of that stuff, but meeting the most amazing people on earth seem to ride motorcycles. And it's just, Malcolm Smith, are you kidding me? Craig Johnson, are you kidding me? It's just the most amazing thing. And so your motives have to be sort of aligned like that, because if the most wonderful thing that's happened to me in motorcycling is that I've been a sort of an average racer all along and never really great. You know why? Because I ended up being a motorcycle salesman and in the power sports industry as a salesman, and I'm pretty good at that. And I've been able to do it. I'm still doing it at 74. I couldn't be a great road racer at 74. I could be a road racer still, but I couldn't be a good one. If you're a racer or an incredible motorcycle enthusiast, and you think being in the business is a way to support your habit, it's probably a bad idea, because your weekends are going to be ruined for a really long time.
That's for sure.
But if you fall in love with the people that are in the business, I don't go to work. I go visit my friends, and sometimes they give me money for doing it.
That is another saying of yours that to this day I use, and people that know me have heard me say it, is I don't really have to work. I just get to travel around this country and visit with my friends and talk about motorcycles. You taught me that very early on. I still use that all the time, and it's so true. You talk about people wanting to get in it for money. I guess that gave me a glimmer of hope, because it seems like nowadays money's not really as important to kids. I definitely see it with the youth that I see, that money's not as big of a deal as it was for me. It was a huge driver for me to get into this industry and not expect to make a ton of money, but just do something you love and something that's fun. That gives me a glimmer of hope that we're going to see a good future here.
Well, I welcome the human aspect to this business. It is everything for me. the algorithms and the data processing and all that other stuff have a place in our industry, but without the skin on skin, without the human aspect, it's nothing. And it's, golly, I love walking into a dealership and smelling the smells and feeling the feels. But when you start talking to the people, you start to understand.
Absolutely. Do you have any asks or requests of my audience?
Yeah, just don't be afraid. This world we're in right now has a lot of things to be concerned about, and it requires that we all have the stamina and the ability to fight for what we believe in, whether it's land use, whether it's sound issues, whether you like EV or you don't, whether you appreciate what motorcycling has meant to this country and to the people that live in it, that have experienced it all their lives. If you can be one of those people, come on. It's a career worth having. I love you already and don't even know some of you.
Very good. You're not much of a social media guy, right?
Well, Facebook, and I'm trying to. I've been on Facebook a lot. Golly, that's what a waste. But I do get on there, and I'm trying to tweet a little bit, but I'm not very good at it. And whatever. Call me on the phone. We'll talk forever.
There you go. I put a link up to your Facebook page. You may get a friend request or two out of it.
Great.
And then, do you have any last parting words?
I think I might have covered it the last time around. What a great career, what a wonderful time, and meeting people like you and many of the folks that are listening to this. I'm sure our paths have crossed. I can't wait for AIM Expo. We need to get together. Man, do we need to get together. The indie shows, the old Cincinnati shows, all of those things, we got together. We talked to each other. We need to get together. So if you're within any kind of driving, flying, financial capacity or whatever to get to the AIM Expo, go to the AIM Expo. We need to get together.
I agree. They closed the AIM Expo to the public now.
Well, that's a mistake.
Yep. So the public's no longer, invited, welcome. I don't know what the right word is, but there is no open to the public day at the end, which is incredibly frustrating for me. But yes, I absolutely love the Indie Dealer Days, the Indie Dealer Expo, when all of the shops, all the manufacturers, all the vendors, all the distributors, everybody was there. It was a giant industry party and a lot of work got done there. So I wish we would get back to that. So maybe we're headed that direction.
Let me give you this little piece for the end. No matter where you shop, no matter what you ride, please support your local motorcycle dealer, your motorcycle club, and the motorcycle in your area. Please support those. It's incredible how much effort goes into those places and those events, and those people are worthy of your few dollars and your time.
Very nice. Love it. Folks, if you like what you're hearing, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. You can follow the adventures on Facebook or Instagram by looking for The Real Wild Ass. Of course, I am Wild Ass Craig. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you again in a couple weeks. And of course, thank you again, Rick, for coming on the show.
I appreciate the opportunity.